Hands where I can see them. Step away from the car. The voice cut through the dim hum of the parking garage like a crack of thunder. Officer Ethan Caldwell's hand hovered over his holster, his pulse quickening under the glow of cold fluorescent light. His training told him to assess, de-escalate, breathe. But something in his chest, something old and poisoned, overpowered reason. The man standing beside the black BMW didn't flinch. Calm, collected, that composure, to Ethan, felt like defiance. And defiance, he'd been taught, meant danger before going into this story. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. And if this kind of story makes you think, subscribe to the channel and give me a like. It really helps bring more stories like this to life. Now, let's begin. Ethan Caldwell was 25, 9 months into his badge, too young to understand that every decision he made carried the weight of history, too proud to admit that the shadow of his father, an ex-cop fired for racial slurs caught on tape, still lived in him. That shadow whispered whenever he saw confidence in a black man's eyes. It whispered now. He had patrolled this route for weeks, driving through Midtown's clean, wet streets. The rain had stopped an hour ago, but drops still trembled on the windshield, glowing red and blue from the reflection of his dashboard lights. He liked this time of night. Quiet, empty, no witnesses, no noise but his own thoughts. The call came over dispatch about a suspicious vehicle in the Pinnacle Midtown garage. Nothing unusual, just another report by someone afraid of shadows. But when he saw the black BMW M760i glide into the second level, something inside him clicked. It wasn't reason, it was instinct. Or at least, what he thought was instinct. Plate doesn't fit the face, he muttered, checking his onboard computer. The system lagged. Typical. He tapped the screen in frustration, the radio static popping like dry wood in a fire. Then he saw him. Marcus Harrington stepped out of the car with the kind of composure that came from years of courtroom pressure. Tall, mid-40s, black, tailored leather jacket, briefcase in hand. He didn't move like a criminal. He moved like someone who owned his space. To Ethan, that was reason enough. He turned off the cruiser, opened the door, and stepped into the humid air. The garage lights buzzed overhead. "Sir," Ethan called out, firm but tight. "Step away from the vehicle." Marcus paused, confused. He looked around, half expecting another car nearby. Then he saw the officer, hand hovering near his weapon, eyes locked. "Is there a problem?" "Officer?" Marcus asked, voice calm but tired. He'd been on the bench since 7 that morning, 14 hours of hearings. His lungs ached, a dull reminder of the quiet diagnosis he carried in his jacket pocket. Stage 1. Treatable, but don't wait too long. Ethan's jaw tightened. "ID. Now." Marcus straightened. For what reason? That tone, steady, precise, was the kind Ethan hated. It sounded like control, like someone telling him he wasn't in charge. His father's voice flashed in memory. "Don't let them talk circles around you. You show them who's in control, sir." "I'm not going to ask again," Ethan said, stepping closer. His boots echoed. His hand moved toward his holster, more out of habit than need. Marcus sighed. He'd seen this pattern play out in countless cases. Profiling, escalation, excuses. He took a slow breath and tried to de-escalate. "Officer," he said evenly. "My name is Judge Marcus Harrington. I just came from Fulton County Courthouse. I have my credentials right here." Ethan didn't blink. The word judge didn't land as respect. It landed as challenge. "Keep your hands visible," he barked. Louder this time. His voice bounced off the concrete walls. A few cars down, someone stirred. Marcus raised both hands slightly, frustrated but controlled. "You're making a mistake." "You can explain that downtown," Ethan said, stepping closer. In that instant, the thin thread of calm broke. Ethan's hand brushed his weapon. Marcus instinctively moved one step back, trying to reach into his coat for his ID badge. The motion was small, but Ethan's training, warped by fear, saw threat. Back up. Now. Marcus froze. Officer! Don't move! Ethan's voice cracked. Tyrone Jenkins was on the third-floor balcony, leaning on the railing, half hidden in shadow. He had just finished a workout with Marcus 2 hours earlier. When he saw the officer approach his friend, he felt the old burn in his gut. 3 months ago, that same officer had pulled him over for smelling weed. He hadn't forgotten. He unlocked his phone and hit record. Down below, Ethan's foot slid slightly on the wet floor. The tension was unbearable. 2 men caught between fear and pride, history and habit. Marcus raised his voice just enough to be clear. Officer Caldwell, you're violating protocol. Terry v. Ohio requires. The officer's hand jerked. Don't tell me the law. And then it happened. A movement, a misunderstanding, and a mistake that would haunt both of them forever. Ethan shoved forward, trying to restrain Marcus, but his hand slipped. Marcus stumbled backward, shoulder smashing against a concrete pillar. The sound was sickening. Ethan froze. His gun was drawn now. He didn't even remember pulling it. His breath came shallow. For a moment, there was silence, only the echo of his own heartbeat. Marcus groaned, clutching his shoulder. He wasn't resisting. He couldn't. The pain was sharp, electric. He dropped his briefcase, papers scattered across the wet floor. Jesus. Officer, he managed, voice strained. You've gone too far. Ethan's voice faltered. Stay where you are. Tyrone's camera captured everything. The posture, the panic, the gun. The lens trembled in his hand, but he kept it steady enough. He knew the world would need to see this. For a few seconds. Time stopped. A Superior Court judge on the ground, a rookie officer with his gun drawn, and above them, the city of Atlanta, unaware that a storm was about to begin. Ethan holstered his weapon, still shaking. You're under detention for resisting an officer, he muttered, but his voice was hollow. He knew it wasn't true. He knew what he had done. Marcus tried to push himself up. You'll answer for this, he said softly, with the calm certainty of a man who had seen justice from every side. Ethan stepped back. His body camera blinked red, recording witness, proof, and up above. Tyrone whispered to himself, not this time. He sent the video to his encrypted drive. The file size blinked, 4K, 2.3 gigabytes, evidence sealed. The rain outside began again, light but steady, tapping on the steel edges of the garage. Ethan stood still, staring at his reflection in a puddle, gun in hand, fear in his eyes, the face of everything he swore he'd never become. He didn't know it yet, but by sunrise, the whole world would know his name. Tyrone Jenkins had seen enough bad nights in Atlanta to know when something was about to explode, but what he saw in that garage went beyond anger. It was history repeating itself. The sound of that officer's voice, the shove, the fall. It all hit him like a wound reopening. He'd been there before, on the hood of his own car, hands shaking while Officer Ethan Caldwell laughed and said, "Just doing my job." That night, he swore if it ever happened again, he'd make sure the world saw it. And now, 3 months later, it was happening again, to his friend. He zoomed in on the lens, his heart pounding. The glare of the overhead light hit the wet pavement, illuminating Marcus on the ground, clutching his shoulder. Ethan's gun trembled slightly as he barked orders that made no sense. "Stay still! Don't move!" Tyrone muttered under his breath. "He's not moving." Fool. He kept recording. 30 seconds of silence followed. 30 seconds that would change all their lives. Ethan's radio crackled, but he didn't respond. The body camera blinked red, still running. Then he holstered his weapon, knelt down, and muttered into his mic. Suspect slipped. Minor accident. He didn't even notice Marcus's briefcase lying open. Its contents scattered: a courthouse pass, a gold pen, and a judge's ID card. Tyrone caught that, too. The title on the badge gleamed under the flickering light: Superior Court of Georgia. Tyrone knew what to do. He ended the recording, took one deep breath, and whispered, "This one's not getting buried." Then he walked quietly toward the stairwell, careful not to be seen. Marcus tried to sit up, pain radiating down his arm. The officer's face above him looked young, frightened, and angry all at once. "You just assaulted a judge," Marcus said softly, the words more weary than furious. Ethan's lips parted, but no words came. He didn't know what to say. He didn't even know what he believed anymore. Minutes later, the siren of another patrol echoed into the garage. Sergeant Lydia Ramirez arrived, sharp, steady, and exhausted from a double shift. Her eyes took in the scene: an injured black man on the ground, her rookie standing frozen. "What the hell happened here?" she demanded. Ethan straightened up, stammering. He resisted, slipped. "I called it in." She looked at Marcus's face, calm but cold, and knew instantly that wasn't true. But she also knew the politics of survival inside APD. "Get him checked out," she said, her voice flat. "Then file it as a minor use of force." Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, Sergeant, you will file it as what it is: assault under color of law." Lydia avoided his eyes. "Sir, I'll make sure it's noted properly." "No, you won't," Marcus replied. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "I've seen this pattern before. You bury the report, and another officer does it again, not this time." Lydia exhaled, looking at Ethan, who stood pale and silent. "Officer Caldwell, back to the precinct. Now." "Yes, ma'am." When they were gone, she called for EMS and stayed until Marcus was taken to Emory Hospital. She didn't know who he was, but something about the way he carried himself told her this wouldn't go away quietly. Back at headquarters, the fluorescent lights hummed as Captain Jamal Thompson reviewed the preliminary report. The description was vague, too vague. Suspect slipped while resisting verbal commands. He replayed Ethan's body cam footage twice. The first time, he focused on the action. The second, on the sound. The tremor in Ethan's voice, the tone of panic. It wasn't fear of danger. It was fear of defiance. Jamal leaned back in his chair. He knew Marcus Harrington. They had grown up in the same neighborhood, gone to the same public school before life took them in different directions. One became a cop, the other a lawyer, and now fate had brought them back to this intersection. One in uniform, one in pain. He dialed Marcus's number. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Jamal closed his eyes, remembering a night in 1989 when they were both 16. The two of them had been stopped on their way home from a basketball game. The officer called them boys, made them sit on the curb for 40 minutes, and dumped out Marcus's backpack just to check. Jamal remembered how Marcus swore that night he'd fight the system from the inside, and he did. Now, the system had turned back on him. Meanwhile, Ethan sat alone in an interrogation room, his badge on the table. The overhead light was harsh, the air still. His thoughts churned. He could still hear Marcus's voice, that calm certainty. "You'll answer for this." Ethan gripped his head. He didn't understand how everything had spun out of control so fast. He wasn't like his father. Was he? But then he saw the footage on the news replay monitor in the corner of the room. Someone had leaked it already. A still frame of him pointing his weapon, frozen mid-scream. His throat went dry. Lydia knocked on the door, then entered quietly. "You okay?" Ethan looked up, eyes red. "No. They're calling me racist already." She didn't answer right away. Instead, She placed a thin folder on the table. This is your psych eval. Ethan, Dr. Alicia Brooks ran it during your training. You remember her? Yeah. She flagged you, Lydia said, voice low. Said you showed high implicit bias and poor impulse control. Recommended suspension and retraining. Ethan frowned. That's not in my file. No, Lydia said. It's not. I buried it. Thought you just needed time. I was wrong. Ethan's jaw clenched. So that's it. Huh? You're throwing me under the bus? She sighed. I'm trying to save what's left of you. You're not ready for this job. Maybe you never were. At that moment. Jamal entered. His tone was formal, his expression unreadable. Sergeant. Caldwell. He nodded toward the hallway. Conference room. Now. They followed him down the corridor. On the screen inside. The same footage looped again. But this time, from another angle. Someone had filmed the incident from above. The third floor. The quality was crystal clear. Tyrone Jenkins's video. The room went silent. Ethan's hands shook. Lydia's face drained of color. Jamal paused the video at the exact frame where Marcus fell. That's a superior court judge, he said slowly. You realize what this means? Ethan couldn't speak. It means the mayor, the governor, and half of Washington will know your name by tomorrow, Jamal said. And it means this department just lit a fuse under every racial wound this city's got left. Outside, the night deepened. In a small apartment near Sweet Auburn, Tyrone plugged his phone into his laptop, encrypting the footage before uploading it to a shared cloud. He typed one message to a contact labeled SK. You wanted proof? Here it is. Full 4K. Timestamp 7:41 p.m. Atlanta PD. He hit send. Across town. In the newsroom of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Reporter Sarah Klein saw the file appear. She clicked play. Her eyes widening as the truth unfolded. No narration, no commentary, just raw footage of a man with a badge losing control. She knew it was real because of the silence after the fall. She whispered, "This is it." By morning, that silence would be gone, replaced by sirens, chants, and headlines. But for now, in the dark corners of a city still healing from old wounds, the line had been crossed. The red line between authority and abuse, between fear and justice. And this time, there was no going back. The morning after the video leaked, Atlanta awoke to a city that felt heavier than it had the night before. The air was tense, as if the whole skyline knew what was coming. At police headquarters, Sergeant Lydia Ramirez walked through the glass doors with a weight in her chest she couldn't quite name. Overnight, her precinct had gone from quiet routine to the center of a national outrage. Phones rang non-stop, cameras gathered outside, and reporters shouted questions through barricades. Every officer she passed kept their heads down. No one wanted to speak the words that hung in the air. Judge Marcus Harrington. Inside the command office, Captain Jamal Thompson sat at his desk, staring at a paused frame of the 4K video. Marcus on the ground, Ethan standing over him. The look on Marcus's face wasn't fear. It was disbelief. Jamal had seen that expression before, on victims who never thought the law could turn on them. But seeing it on a judge's face hit him somewhere deep. He rubbed his temple and called internal affairs. Get me Dr. Alicia Brooks. Now. Lydia entered just as he hung up. You called me in? Jamal nodded. Close the door. She did. And for a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. Jamal leaned forward. We've been through a lot in this department, but this is something different. He turned the monitor toward her. The world's watching. We either face it or get swallowed by it. Lydia tried to stay composed. I filed the report as an accidental injury, I thought. You thought wrong. Jamal interrupted. His tone wasn't harsh, just weary. You should have logged that use of force report as misconduct. You knew it the moment you saw his badge on the ground. She looked down. You're right. Internal Affairs wants your full statement. Jamal continued. And Lydia. They're going to come after anyone who covered for him. Her voice dropped. That includes me. Yeah, Jamal said quietly. It does. When Dr. Alicia Brooks arrived, she carried a calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos around her, a civilian psychologist contracted by APD. Alicia had seen this cycle before. Officers flagged for bias, supervisors looking the other way, and another incident the department couldn't defend. She had met Ethan during his psychological evaluation months earlier and warned the command that he wasn't ready. Her report had been clear, displays reactive defensiveness when challenged by authority figures of color, recommends suspension and retraining. But her report never reached the review board. Someone had buried it. She entered Jamal's office, set her folder on the desk, and said softly, I warned you. Jamal nodded. I know. Lydia stood beside the window, eyes fixed on the parking lot where reporters clustered like storm clouds. Alicia turned to her. You were his supervisor? Yes. Did you hide my evaluation? Lydia hesitated. The truth caught in her throat. Yes. I thought he just needed time to adjust. I was wrong. Alicia studied her face for a moment, then said quietly, We all make mistakes, Sergeant. But some of them cost people their faith in justice. That line lingered in the room. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus lay in a hospital bed at Emory University Hospital, his right arm in a sling, a dull ache pulsing in his shoulder. The doctors said it would heal, but his pride, his trust, would take longer. His son, Jason, sat beside him, scrolling through his phone, eyes wide. Dad, they're saying your name everywhere. TikTok, CNN, all of it. You're trending #1. Marcus smiled faintly, but his eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling. Not the way I ever wanted to trend. Jason frowned. Why didn't you tell them who you were right away? I did, Marcus said softly. But when someone doesn't see you, titles don't matter. He turned to his son. Remember that. Jason, you have to be twice as calm in a world that expects you to break, at that moment. His phone buzzed. It was Jamal. Marcus answered, voice steady but tired. Hey, Jamal. I saw the footage, Jamal said quietly. And I'm sorry. I know you are. Marcus replied. You always tried to fix things from inside, but maybe this time. Fixing means letting it all burn. Jamal paused. You planning to file? I'm not sure yet, Marcus admitted. Right now. I just want the truth out. No spin, no blue wall. After they hung up. Marcus stared at the sunlight creeping across the floor. He knew what had to come next. He'd spent a lifetime fighting for others. Now, it was his turn to stand in that courtroom, not behind the bench, but on the witness stand, back at headquarters. Lydia walked the halls in silence. Officers whispered as she passed. A printed still of the video was taped to the break room door. Someone's crude attempt at humor with the words, "Another one bites the dust." She ripped it down without a word. She found Ethan sitting in the corner of the holding area, head bowed, uniform wrinkled. He looked nothing like the confident rookie she'd once mentored. He looked like a child who'd seen the world collapse around him. They're saying I'm a monster, Ethan murmured. My wife took the kid to her mother's. Said she can't have my face on the news every night. Lydia leaned against the wall. You crossed a line. Ethan, you didn't see him as a person. You saw a story your father taught you to believe. He looked up, eyes red. He was calm. Too calm. I thought he was mocking me. Calm isn't threat, she said. It's dignity. He swallowed hard. What happens now? You'll be suspended, Lydia said. Internal Affairs will recommend criminal review, but what happens after that depends on what you do next. Ethan stared at the floor. What would you do? I'd tell the truth. Lydia replied. All of it. That night. Dr. Brooks finished her revised report. It read, Officer Caldwell's conduct demonstrates clear evidence of implicit bias aggravated by inadequate supervision. Recommendation, termination, and mandatory department-wide training. She sent it to the chief, the mayor's office, and the Department of Justice liaison. There would be no burying it this time, as midnight approached. Jamal stood alone in his office, the city lights flickering outside his window. He knew the department would take the heat, that political leaders would demand resignations. But deep down, he also knew this might be the moment Atlanta needed, a reckoning forced by truth. He opened the window slightly, letting the cool air in, and whispered to himself, maybe this is how we start over. At Emory. Marcus couldn't sleep. He scrolled through messages, some from fellow judges offering support, others from strangers thanking him for standing his ground. But one message stood out. It was anonymous, sent from an unlisted number. I was there. I saw everything. I'm ready to talk. He read it twice, then typed back, Who is this? No reply came, but he had a feeling he knew. Tyrone Jenkins, the man who'd captured it all, the man who'd just torn the net that had protected the powerful for too long. Outside. Atlanta buzzed with sirens and voices. Protesters had begun to gather near the courthouse, holding signs that read, Justice for Judges. Some shouted, some prayed. But all of them shared one message. The city was done pretending not to see. And somewhere in the precinct, Ethan sat alone, staring at his empty badge. It reflected the flicker of fluorescent light like a mirror he no longer wanted to face. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel powerful. He felt exposed. The net had torn, and through that tear, the truth had finally found a way in. By the time dawn reached Atlanta, the city was already on fire, not with smoke, but with outrage. The clip had crossed 50 million views overnight. Every major network replayed the same 10 seconds, a black judge falling backward against a pillar, an officer's gun drawn, the silence after impact. Commentators filled the airwaves with theories, politicians with statements, and strangers with opinions. But beneath all that noise, something deeper stirred, a weariness that had finally found its breaking point. Sarah Klein watched it unfold from her small apartment newsroom, a tangle of monitors and coffee cups. Her inbox overflowed with interview requests. CNN wanted her at 9, MSNBC at 10. Even international outlets were calling. She ignored them all for the moment. Her phone vibrated with another message, this time from an encrypted account labeled TJ. You didn't show the whole clip. Show it all. Sarah typed back, I will, but not yet. The full story needs context, not just clicks. She meant it. Sarah was the daughter of a police officer, one who'd been fired for corruption before dying of liver failure. She'd grown up watching her mother balance 2 jobs while her father's old badge gathered dust in a drawer. She hated dirty cops but didn't hate the badge. She hated the silence that let bad ones keep it. So when she opened Tyrone Jenkins's 4K video and saw that officer's gun tremble, she didn't just see misconduct. She saw the rot inside the system her father once swore to serve. She played the clip again, slowing the frame just before Marcus fell. The lighting caught Ethan's face, a split second of panic, confusion, fear. Then the shove, then the sound. That sound haunted her, the dull, human thud that told the truth better than any words could. Sarah leaned back, exhaling. All right, Judge, she murmured to the screen. Let's make this count. By 11:17 that night, her headline was live. Georgia judge assaulted by APD rookie, full video, within minutes. It had 10,000 shares. By morning, 10 million. At City Hall, Mayor Lydia Sinclair called an emergency press briefing. Cameras crowded the marble steps. Atlanta is a city of justice, she began, her voice steady but sharp. What we witnessed is unacceptable. The FBI will conduct a full and independent investigation into the Atlanta Police Department's handling of this case. Reporters shouted questions about accountability, but she cut them off. We will not hide behind bureaucracy. The people deserve truth. Inside APD headquarters, Captain Jamal Thompson watched the broadcast from his office, his badge resting on the desk beside a cup of untouched coffee. He'd seen scandals come and go, but this one felt different. It wasn't just the brutality, it was who the victim was, a judge, someone who knew the law inside and out, still powerless under its weight when faced with a gun. He looked out the window toward the growing crowd outside the precinct. Protesters held signs that read, "Stop the stops, justice for judges, and no more excuses." The chants echoed down Peachtree Street, a rhythm of frustration and hope intertwined. Jamal could feel the building tremble slightly with each roar. Lydia Ramirez walked in, pale from exhaustion. "They're asking for statements from all supervisors," she said quietly. "Internal Affairs wants my report unedited, then give it to them." Jamal replied. She hesitated. "It'll take me down too." He looked her in the eye. "Then it's time we both stopped hiding. This isn't about saving ourselves anymore." Lydia nodded slowly. "You think they'll listen?" "They'll have to," he said. "The whole country's listening. Across town." Marcus Harrington sat in his living room, shoulder-wrapped, TV muted. The news played silently in the background while he read through his notes. Every few seconds, his eyes drifted to a photo of his late wife on the mantel. She had died 5 years earlier from a stroke, leaving him to raise their son alone. She used to tell him, "Don't just fight for justice, Marcus, become it." He thought of that now as he dialed a familiar number. Elena Vasquez. "Elena, it's Marcus." She exhaled sharply. "I saw it. Are you okay?" "I'll live," he said, managing a faint smile. "But I can't let this slide. I want to file a federal civil rights suit." There was a pause on the line. "Marcus, you're a sitting judge. This will make enemies. I already have them," he said. "This isn't about me anymore. It's about the next man who won't have a camera watching." Elena was quiet for a moment. "Then let's do it right. We'll file under Section 1983, violation of constitutional rights under color of law. We'll name the officer, the city, and the department. How much are you seeking?" Marcus looked toward the window, where the faint glow of the protests flickered like fireflies in the distance. 15 million, he said softly. "Not for me." For reform. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of APD's records division, 2 FBI agents combed through the department's database. They were part of a joint civil rights task force dispatched overnight. Their search revealed a disturbing trail. Ethan Caldwell's 4 prior complaints for unjustified stops, all marked dismissed due to insufficient evidence. The digital signatures on each report had been altered. The names pointed back to one source, Sergeant Lydia Ramirez. Agent Foster called the captain's office immediately. "We've got evidence of data tampering," he said. "Your department's internal oversight has been compromised." Jamal listened in silence, his stomach tightening. "Send me everything you have," he said, "and Agent Foster. Keep it confidential. If the wrong people hear this too soon, it'll get buried." At that same moment, Sarah Klein's inbox pinged again. A new message, anonymous sender. Attached, an internal memo from APD dated January 2025. It read, "Officer E. Caldwell, flagged for potential bias behavior. Recommendation, remedial training, no action taken." She recognized the sender's signature block, L. Ramirez. Sarah felt a chill run through her. Someone inside was flipping. By midnight, the protests outside APD headquarters had tripled in size. The air buzzed with chants, drums, and the rhythm of collective anger. Tyrone Jenkins stood on the steps, his phone raised high. Streaming live. "This isn't about one man," he said to the camera. "This is about a system that keeps repeating itself and pretending it's surprised." The crowd roared behind him. His video reached 1 million viewers in under an hour. Back inside, Lydia sat in her office alone, staring at the flickering screensaver on her computer. She'd just received a subpoena from the FBI. She knew what it meant. She was next. Her hands trembled slightly as she whispered, "I should have stopped him sooner, at home." Ethan sat in his darkened living room, the sound of helicopters faint outside. His phone buzzed with unknown numbers, reporters, threats, messages calling him a monster. He didn't answer. On the table beside him, his body camera lay open, the battery blinking red. He pressed play, watched himself, watched the moment he pushed, the moment it all broke. He whispered, "What did I do?" From her apartment, Sarah finished editing her next headline. APD supervisor covered up bias report. FBI expands probe. She hesitated before publishing, knowing it would destroy reputations, but she also knew silence had destroyed far more lives. She hit post. By morning, the mayor would announce a full federal investigation into APD. The Justice Department would arrive within 48 hours. The city would brace for the largest protest since 2020, and in a quiet hospital room, Judge Marcus Harrington would close his laptop, whisper a prayer for patience, and prepare for the fight ahead. The flame had spread, and there was no stopping it now. Ethan Caldwell hadn't slept in 3 days. The headlines, the noise, the endless images of himself on every channel had turned his small apartment into a cage of regret. The blinds stayed closed. The air smelled of old coffee and guilt. His phone had gone silent since his wife Emily left 2 nights ago, packing their son's toys without a word. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. Whatever sympathy she'd once had was gone. The news had shown her the clip. Again and again. The officer who assaulted a judge. That title would follow him for the rest of his life. He sat on the edge of the couch, staring at his hands. They still trembled slightly when he thought of the moment Marcus fell. He told himself it was instinct, a misunderstanding, bad training. But each time he watched the footage, that excuse died a little more. The truth wasn't about training. It was about him. Something broken inside that had been there long before the badge. His father's voice echoed from childhood. "Never let them talk down to you." He had followed that command like scripture. And now, he was living its curse. A knock came at the door. He didn't move. Another knock, sharper this time. He opened it to find Sergeant Lydia Ramirez standing there, uniform neat but her face drawn and tired. She held a small envelope in her hand. "Can I come in?" she asked. Ethan hesitated, then stepped aside. The living room was dim. The TV muted on a news segment still flashing his name. Lydia didn't comment on the mess. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "I thought you'd want this," she said, handing him the envelope. He opened it. Inside was a USB drive dated the 14th of December, 2024. He whispered, "What is this?" "Your psychological evaluation," Lydia said quietly. "The one I buried?" Ethan looked up, confused. "Why would you give me this now?" "Because I can't live with it anymore," she replied. "The FBI has everything. They know I hid it. They'll question me under oath tomorrow, and I'll tell them the truth." Ethan's throat tightened. "You're going to turn on me?" "I'm not turning on you," she said. "I'm turning toward the truth. There's a difference." He set the USB on the coffee table. "So that's it. You destroy me to save yourself." Lydia's eyes filled with something that looked almost like pity. "You destroyed yourself." "Ethan, I just helped delay it." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lydia added softly, "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were one of the good ones. Young, sharp, eager to learn. I didn't realize how deep your father's shadow ran. You didn't either." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Don't talk about my father." "I will," she said calmly, "because that's where this started. Not in the parking garage, not in training, but in that house where you learned to hate before you learned to think." He turned away. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," she said. "You're not the first man I've seen drown in someone else's poison." When she left, Ethan sat alone again, staring at the small USB. He didn't plug it in. He didn't need to. He knew what it said: bias, aggression, control issues. It was his mirror, written in words instead of glass. Across town, at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution newsroom, Sarah Klein was drafting her next piece. She had just received confirmation from a federal source that Internal Affairs had subpoenaed Lydia Ramirez and Captain Jamal Thompson. Her article, titled "Atlanta PD Faces Internal Mutiny," would hit the wire by morning, but as she typed, she felt no triumph, only a quiet sadness. Every name she exposed was another fracture in a system already cracking. At the same time, Marcus Harrington sat with his attorney, Elena Vasquez, reviewing the complaint they were about to file in federal court. The suit demanded $15 million in damages and the immediate suspension of all officers involved in the cover-up. The legal language was cold and precise, but every line carried personal weight. Elena glanced up from the document. "Once this is filed, it's going to move fast. Are you ready for that kind of spotlight?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I've spent my life watching others fight these battles. It's time I take one myself." Outside the courthouse, hundreds of protesters gathered, their chants echoing through the marble corridors. Reporters lined the steps, cameras flashing. When Marcus stepped out with his arm still in a sling, the crowd quieted. He spoke without notes. "This case is not about revenge," he said. "It's about accountability. I stand not only as a judge, but as a father, a citizen, and a man who believes in the promise of justice. No one should fear the system they serve." The cheers rose again, thunderous and defiant. That evening, the FBI held a closed-door meeting with city officials and APD leadership. Jamal Thompson sat across from Agent Foster, the lead investigator. The agent spoke calmly, sliding a folder across the table. "These are Caldwell's prior stops, 4 in total, all dismissed by your sergeant, all involving black drivers. We also found your department's internal emails referencing pressure to minimize racial incident reports." Jamal felt his stomach sink. "You're saying this was systemic?" Foster met his eyes. "Captain, it always is." When the meeting ended, Jamal returned to his office, removed his badge, and placed it on the desk. He stared at it for a long time, then dialed Lydia's number. She answered on the second ring. "Lydia," he said quietly. "You're going to testify?" "Yes," she said. "I already told them everything." He sighed. "Then so will I." "You'll lose your command," she warned. "I lost it the moment we stopped telling the truth," he replied, and hung up, at home. Ethan poured himself a drink. The sound of rain against the window mixed with the low hum of a news broadcast. He turned up the volume just in time to hear the anchor say, "Federal prosecutors may file criminal charges against Officer Ethan Caldwell within the week. Sources confirm he may face counts of civil rights violations and aggravated assault." He set the glass down, hands trembling. The room spun. In a moment of anger, he grabbed the remote and hurled it at the TV, shattering the screen. Then he sat down and cried. Not the kind of tears that come from fear, but the kind that come when you finally see yourself for who you are. The next morning, he showed up at the precinct in plain clothes, eyes red, expression hollow. Reporters swarmed him as he approached the entrance. Someone shouted, "Do you have anything to say to Judge Harrington?" He stopped, looked directly into the camera, and said, quietly, "I wish I'd listened." Then he walked inside, ready to face what was left. Later that day, Dr. Alicia Brooks finished testifying before the grand jury. Her words were simple, factual, and devastating. Officer Caldwell's actions were predictable. His bias was identified, documented, and ignored. The department's failure to act was not a mistake. It was a choice. When she left the courtroom, she passed Marcus in the hallway. They exchanged a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement between two people who understood that truth. Once spoken, can't be taken back. That night, Lydia received her official notice of suspension pending review. She accepted it without protest. She sat in her car for a long time afterward, hands on the steering wheel, tears she didn't bother to wipe away. She had thought covering for Ethan would protect him, protect the department, maybe even protect herself. Instead, it had destroyed them all. At midnight, Sarah's new article hit the front page. Inside Atlanta PD, the betrayal that shook the badge. Her words were sharp but human. Sometimes the hardest truth is not that one man failed, but that those around him chose silence over courage. The city read, the city wept. And somewhere, Ethan Caldwell opened that old USB drive at last, watching the file he'd never dared to see, on screen. Dr. Brooks's voice echoed softly through his speakers. He shows empathy when guided, but lacks moral compass under pressure. He closed his eyes. For the first time, he didn't fight the truth. He just let it burn. The federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta had never been this full. News vans lined the street like armor, and crowds packed every inch of the steps. Activists, lawyers, church leaders, and citizens who'd never met Marcus Harrington but felt his story as if it were their own. Inside, the marble floors glistened under the television lights. The words carved above the entrance, "Equal justice under law," seemed heavier today, almost accusing. Every eye turned toward courtroom 3, where history was about to unfold. Ethan Caldwell sat at the defense table, wearing a plain gray suit instead of a uniform. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, but he barely heard. His gaze was fixed on the jury box, 12 strangers who would soon decide the course of his life. Across the aisle sat Marcus Harrington, posture straight, sling gone, but his right arm still stiff from the injury. He wore a dark blue suit and an expression that was neither angry nor vengeful, just resolute. The two men did not speak. They didn't need to. The silence between them said more than any words could. Judge Ramona Kellis entered, her robe flowing, her tone formal but gentle. Court is now in session. United States versus Officer Ethan Caldwell, case number 25, 1874. The sound of shuffling papers echoed like thunder. The prosecution opened with simple words. "This case," the attorney said, "is about power, how it's used, and how it's abused." She gestured toward Marcus, a man whose only crime was confidence, a judge who became a suspect because of the color of his skin. She turned toward the defense, and an officer who became what he swore to oppose. Ethan kept his head down. Each sentence cut through him like a blade. He had wanted to tell his side, to explain the panic that had taken over him that night. But the video, the cold, clear, unblinking video, spoke louder than any plea. Then came the witnesses. First was Tyrone Jenkins, the man whose phone had captured it all. He took the stand in a crisp shirt, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I didn't record it to hurt anyone," he said. "I recorded it because I've been there. I've been that man told to stay still when I wasn't doing a thing wrong. I knew nobody would believe us unless they saw it. He turned toward the defense table. Now they've seen it. The jury watched the full 4K clip again, this time projected across a giant courtroom screen. Every breath, every echo, every tremor of fear filled the room. When Marcus's shoulder hit the pillar, several jurors flinched. Ethan closed his eyes. Next came Dr. Alicia Brooks, calm and composed in a Navy suit. She explained the psychological findings from Ethan's evaluation, the report that had been buried. Her testimony was clinical, but heartbreaking. He showed measurable bias, rooted in early conditioning. It could have been corrected with intervention, but the department ignored it. She paused, meeting the jurors' eyes. That neglect cost a man his dignity and this city its trust. Then Sergeant Lydia Ramirez was called. Her voice cracked as she admitted to suppressing the evaluation. "I thought I was protecting a young officer," she said softly. "I didn't realize I was protecting the sickness." The prosecution rested. The defense called no witnesses. Ethan declined to testify. His lawyer simply said, "My client accepts the evidence and leaves judgment to the court." When Marcus Harrington took the stand, the room went silent. For years, he had questioned others from behind a bench. Now, he sat where they once had. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. He began quietly, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man used to commanding silence. On the night of April 11th, I wasn't a judge, I wasn't an attorney, I was just another man driving home. He paused. I followed the law. I did everything right. But the law didn't follow me back. He looked at the jury, his tone steady but full of conviction. I'm not suing for $15 million because of a bruised shoulder. I'm doing it for my son, and for every son who shouldn't have to be afraid when the lights flash behind them. The system only changes when the people inside it refuse to look away. A murmur rippled through the gallery. One juror wiped away a tear. Even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. When closing arguments ended, Judge Kellis recessed for deliberation. It took less than 4 hours. The crowd held its breath as the foreperson stood. We, the jury, find the defendant, Officer Ethan Caldwell, guilty of violating federal civil rights statutes under color of law. A wave of gasps filled the courtroom. Ethan exhaled, head dropping into his hands. Marcus closed his eyes, whispering a quiet prayer. The judge continued. The court hereby orders the City of Atlanta and the Atlanta Police Department to pay damages in the amount of $15 million to Judge Marcus Harrington, and to implement immediate reforms under federal supervision. She looked down at Ethan. Officer Caldwell, your sentence is suspended for 18 months on the condition of mandatory community service, completion of anti-bias rehabilitation, and continued therapy. This is not mercy. It is a chance to change. The room buzzed with emotion, relief, sorrow, vindication. Outside, the news broke within minutes. Protesters cheered, church bells rang downtown, and headlines across the country read, "Justice in Atlanta. Judge wins historic civil rights case." Reporters flooded the courthouse steps. Sarah Klein stood near the edge, microphone in hand, broadcasting live. Today, a city confronted itself. She said into the camera, what began as a moment of pain became a movement for reform. As the courthouse emptied, Marcus stepped outside, greeted by applause that rolled through the crowd like thunder. He raised his hand, signaling for quiet. Justice, he said, is not revenge. Justice is correction, and correction starts today. The words echoed across the square. Inside, Ethan sat alone in the now empty courtroom. The bailiff gave him a respectful nod but said nothing. Ethan stared at the spot where Marcus had stood on the witness stand. He whispered to himself, "He could have destroyed me, and he didn't." That truth hurt more than any punishment could. Later that evening, Judge Kellis signed the reform order. It mandated 24 months of bias training, a civilian oversight board, and mandatory psychological screenings for all recruits. Captain Jamal Thompson volunteered to oversee the transition team, vowing to rebuild the department from the ground up. Lydia Ramirez submitted her resignation the same night, but later joined Jamal to design the new APD Reform Training Center. By sunset, the courthouse plaza was covered with candles, thousands of them. Some burned for Marcus, others for Ethan, others for the countless names that came before. The hashtag #JusticeForJudges for Judges trended worldwide again. But now it carried a different tone, less fury, more hope. That night, as Marcus left the courthouse, Sarah Klein approached him. "Judge Harrington," she said softly, "do you have a message for the people watching?" He smiled faintly. "Tell them this isn't the end. Justice isn't an event. It's a habit, and habits must be practiced every day." Sarah nodded, recording every word. That clip would play on every major network for weeks. Meanwhile, back in his small apartment, Ethan packed away his uniform for good. The badge lay in the box like a relic of a life he no longer recognized. He folded the shirt carefully, whispered an apology to the empty room, and picked up the phone. His therapist answered on the first ring. "I think I'm ready to start," he said quietly, and across the city. Marcus sat in his study, pen in hand, drafting the founding charter of what he would later call the Harrington Justice Fund, a non-profit dedicated to legal aid for victims of racial profiling. On his desk, beside the papers, sat the old leather briefcase from that night. Its surface was still scuffed where it hit the floor. He ran his fingers across it and smiled. In the distance, the city glowed under a clear Atlanta sky. For the first time in months, the judge breathed freely. Justice had not erased the pain, but it had transformed it. Tomorrow, the work would begin again. 9 months had passed since that night in the parking garage. Atlanta had changed, subtly, then all at once. The protests quieted, but their echoes remained in every precinct meeting and courtroom hallway. The new APD Reform Training Center stood on the edge of downtown, its glass facade catching the morning sun. Inside, fresh recruits listened as Captain Jamal Thompson lectured on empathy, accountability, and restraint. Beside him, Lydia Ramirez spoke softly but firmly about the cost of silence. Her own suspension had become part of the curriculum, a living lesson in how complicity corrodes integrity. No one looked away when she said, "I thought loyalty meant protection. I learned too late that it means honesty." The room always fell silent after that, across town. Marcus Harrington returned to work. His chambers looked the same. The oak desk, the stacks of case files, the photo of his son Jason on graduation day. But the air felt different. Every decision he made now carried the memory of that gun, that shove, that moment of humiliation that had become the spark of reform. His colleagues treated him with newfound reverence. Yet he didn't want reverence. He wanted change. He had donated half of his settlement to establish the Harrington Justice Fund, providing free legal defense for victims of profiling and police misconduct in its first 6 months. The fund had already taken on 82 cases, securing the release of 16 wrongfully charged men. The rest, Marcus promised, would have their day, on weekends. He met with Dr. Alicia Brooks to discuss expanding the program into schools, teaching young officers and students alike how fear becomes bias and how courage must begin within. Alicia had turned her experience into something powerful, too, the Brooks Institute for Police Psychology, where she trained departments nationwide on cognitive empathy. "We can't erase what people are taught in childhood," she told him one morning, "but we can interrupt what they become." Marcus nodded. "Then let's start interrupting." Tyrone Jenkins had become something of a local celebrity, though he hated the word. His footage had earned him a national platform, but he used it wisely. He spoke at universities, churches, and town halls about digital justice. The idea that a phone camera can be both a shield and a sword. During his TED Talk, viewed by 20 million people, he said, "I wasn't a hero. I was just tired of watching injustice vanish into silence." The audience rose to its feet. Marcus watched that speech from home, smiling quietly, knowing Tyrone's courage had been the first domino. Sarah Klein had won a Pulitzer for her coverage of the trial. Her book, The Judge in the Parking Lot, became a national bestseller, read in classrooms and book clubs from Chicago to New York. Yet she never called it a victory. This story wasn't about one man. She said in an interview, it was about a city forced to look at its reflection and not look away, and Ethan Caldwell, once the face of disgrace, now worked as a janitor in a vast warehouse near Hapeville. The job was quiet, the hours long, and the pay modest. But he preferred it that way. Every sweep of his broom felt like penance. Small, humble, necessary. His therapy sessions had become a lifeline, forcing him to confront the ghosts of his upbringing and the rot of his pride. For months, he had rehearsed what he'd say if he ever saw Marcus again, but the words never sounded right. One morning, as sunlight cut through the warehouse windows, he found the courage to write instead. The letter was brief. No excuses, no requests, only gratitude. Judge Harrington, I can't undo what I did, but I can live better because of it. Thank you for choosing justice instead of revenge. He mailed it without a return address. Weeks later, Marcus received that letter at his courthouse office. He read it twice, then set it in the drawer beside the original police report, the one that had started everything. For a long time, he just sat there, letting the weight of those words settle. Then he closed the drawer and whispered, "That's enough." That same evening, as he drove home through the soft light of dusk, his BMW rolled to a stop near an industrial street corner. Ahead, a janitor pushed a broom across the lot, back bent, movement slow but steady. Marcus recognized the posture instantly. He lowered the window. For a moment, neither man spoke. Ethan looked up, startled, then froze. The air between them held everything that words could not repair. Marcus gave a single nod, small, quiet, but full of grace. Ethan's eyes glistened as he lowered his head in acknowledgement. Marcus drove away, heart heavy yet at peace. That night, he stood on his porch, watching the city lights blink against the horizon. Jason joined him, tall now, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "You ever regret suing them?" "Dad?" he asked. Marcus smiled faintly. "No. Regret is for the things you didn't do. I did what was right. That's enough." They stood in silence, the cool Georgia air brushing past them. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. Atlanta wasn't perfect. It never would be. But something fundamental had shifted. The people had found their voice again. The police department had begun to rebuild not with words, but with listening. And in the quiet spaces between chaos and healing, justice, slow, imperfect, human justice, was taking root. When the night deepened and the city's noise faded, Marcus walked back inside, paused at his desk, and wrote the final line of his next keynote speech. Justice is not revenge. Justice is change. He placed the pen down, turned off the light, and looked out the window one last time before bed. The city that had once broken his spirit now glowed softly beneath the stars, flawed, fragile, and full of hope. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, share it. Let someone else feel what justice sounds like. Subscribe, leave a like. Every view, every comment keeps these stories alive, stories that remind us justice is not revenge, it's change.